My name is Henry. I've always been a city boy, born and raised in Chicago, where historic buildings, crowded streets, and the constant hum of urban life were the backdrop of my world. Concrete and glass shaped my surroundings. Nature? That was something confined to neatly trimmed parks or the occasional weekend escape to the coast. So when my journalism professor assigned our final project, an immersive feature that required us to document a lifestyle completely foreign to our own, I found myself driving west, deep into the Montana rangelands. A place so different from everything I knew, it might as well have been another planet. The assignment was clear in theory: spend 3 weeks embedded in an unfamiliar environment, observe daily life, and craft a story that captured its essence through the lens of an outsider. While most of my classmates chose urban beekeepers or lighthouse keepers on the New England coast, I aimed farther, much farther. The Blackwell Ranch, a vast cattle operation stretching across thousands of acres of Montana prairie, had agreed to host me. After a few back and forth emails with the owner, Benjamin Blackwell, I was set. He was an older gentleman who seemed amused by the idea of a city kid trying to understand ranch life. As I rolled down the long dirt road leading to the ranch, dust trailing behind my rental car, I started to question my decision. The land was open and endless, so much sky above and nothing but rolling grassland around me. No skyscrapers, no subway stations, no honking horns, just space. It felt like stepping out of a spaceship onto another world, with no suit, no map, and no idea what came next. The main house came into view, a wide, single-story structure that looked like it had been added onto over the years. Surrounding it were barns, storage sheds, and what I guessed were bunkhouses. As I parked, a man stepped out from one of the barns. He walked with the unmistakable gait of someone who spent more time on horseback than on foot. Tall, lean, built from work, not weights. His dark hair curled under a worn Stetson, and a few days' worth of stubble dusted his jaw. His faded blue shirt was rolled up at the sleeves, showing sun-browned forearms knotted with muscle. His jeans had that lived-in look, and his boots were caked with something I chose to believe was just mud. He couldn't have been more than a few years older than me, maybe 26 to my 23, but there was something in his face, his steady gaze, that suggested he'd lived through more than I had. "You must be the writer," he called out as I stepped out of the car, stretching my back after the long drive. "Henry Bennett," I replied, offering my hand. "Chicago University." His handshake was solid, palms rough with calluses. "Ethan Reeves," he said. "I'm the foreman here." He gave me a once-over, eyeing my clean jeans, button-down shirt, and hopelessly impractical shoes. The corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but close. "Benjamin said you'd be here through calving season. Hope you brought clothes you don't mind ruining." I had, in fact, bought what I thought was practical ranch wear after some online research. Sturdy jeans, flannel shirts, boots that looked rugged enough in the store. But next to Ethan's broken-in gear, mine felt stiff, too clean, too city. "I think I'm prepared," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Though I've never actually been on a working ranch before, might need a little direction." That earned me a real smile, brief but warm. It softened his face, made him look younger somehow. "That's why you're here, isn't it? To learn." He motioned toward the house. "Come on, Benjamin's waiting. Mia probably has lunch ready. We'll get your stuff settled after." As I followed Ethan across the yard, I couldn't help but notice how naturally he moved through this space, like he was a part of it, like his body understood this land in a way mine never could. I, on the other hand, felt like an actor who'd stumbled onto the wrong movie set. No lines, no clue what to do next. Benjamin Blackwell turned out to be in his 60s, his face weathered and lined like the land itself. The sun had carved deep lines into Benjamin Blackwell's face, lines that emphasized, rather than diminished, his quiet dignity. He welcomed me warmly, asking about my drive and my studies. His wife, Mia, a sturdy woman with kind eyes, served a meal hearty enough to feed twice our number. "Ethan will show you around after lunch," Benjamin said. "You'll be staying in the bunkhouse with him and a few of the other hands. Figured it'd give you the most authentic experience for your article. I nodded, but anxiety fluttered in my chest. I'd imagined having my own space, somewhere quiet where I could retreat, gather my thoughts, and write in solitude. The idea of sharing quarters with seasoned ranch hands who would immediately recognize me as an outsider was intimidating. The bunkhouse is basic, Ethan added, noticing my hesitation, but comfortable. And you'll have your own room. Small, but private enough for writing. That helped. A little. But I still wondered how I'd manage 3 full weeks in such close quarters, surrounded by people whose lives were so vastly different from mine. After lunch, Ethan gave me a tour of the ranch, explaining the purpose of each building and walking me through the daily rhythm of operations. The scale of it all was staggering. Thousands of cattle spread across tens of thousands of acres, all managed by a crew of just 8 full-time workers, with seasonal help brought in during the busiest periods. Calving season starts next week, Ethan said as we walked through one of the barns. That's when things really pick up. We'll be working around the clock, checking on the mothers, helping with tough births, making sure the calves are feeding. You want me involved in that? I asked, unable to picture myself helping with something so hands-on, so real. For a moment, Ethan's expression was unreadable. Then he offered a slow, knowing smile. Henry, if you're here to learn, then you're gonna learn it all. I swallowed hard. Suddenly, my 3-week assignment felt a lot more real. Benjamin chuckled from nearby. So you're here for the full experience? Well, nothing gets more real than bringing new life into the world. Don't worry. We don't expect you to know what you're doing. You'll figure it out, just like we all did. The tour ended at the bunkhouse, a long, low building that looked newer than most of the others. Inside, it had a shared common area with worn but welcoming furniture, a small kitchen, a communal bathroom, and a hallway lined with 6 individual rooms. Ethan led me to mine, a compact space with just enough room for a twin bed, a small desk, and my suitcase. It's not the Ritz, he said, watching my reaction. It's perfect, I replied honestly. Exactly what I need. He nodded, satisfied. Get settled. Dinner's at 6 in the main house. After that, it's early to bed. Work starts before dawn. With that, he left, and I was alone with my thoughts. The sounds around me were unfamiliar. The distant lowing of cattle, the occasional whinny of a horse, the soft rustle of wind weaving through the outbuildings. Even the quality of the light filtering through the window felt different. I had come searching for a story, but now I wondered if I'd stepped into something bigger than I was prepared for. What did I, a journalism student who'd never even kept a houseplant alive, know about birth, death, and the elemental rhythm of life that ruled this place? Dinner that evening was lively. I met the other ranch hands, a diverse, rough-around-the-edges group who greeted me with a mix of curiosity and good-natured teasing about my city boy status. Ethan, I noticed, was quieter around them. He listened more than he spoke, but when he did speak, people paid attention. He didn't command respect through loudness or bravado. It was something quieter, earned. My first morning on the ranch came painfully early. By 4:30 a.m., the bunkhouse was already stirring. At 4:45, Ethan knocked on my door, finding me blurry-eyed but determined. "Coffee's in the kitchen," he said. "You're riding with me today. Nothing too complicated, just checking fences and moving some cattle." I would soon learn that "nothing too complicated" was a relative term. After a quick breakfast, Ethan introduced me to Juniper, the calm, steady mare I'd be riding. Despite having only 2 horseback riding lessons under my belt, I found myself mounted and following him into the open fields just as the sun rose across the horizon. That first week blurred by in a whirlwind of unfamiliar experiences. I learned to check fences for breaks, identify grasses for grazing, and recognize when an animal was in distress. My muscles ached from the unfamiliar labor. My hands developed blisters that hardened into calluses. I collapsed into bed each night completely spent, but also strangely fulfilled. Through all of it, Ethan was my guide, patient, but never patronizing. He corrected my mistakes without judgment and acknowledged my small victories without fanfare. He taught by example, showing me how to calm a nervous cow, repair a fence, or read the sky for signs of a coming storm. And slowly, I started to notice other things. The way he spoke to animals in a low, gentle voice that seemed to calm them. The way he always made sure everyone had eaten before serving himself. The quiet competence with which he handled every task. I began to look forward to our rides, to working alongside him, to hearing him say, "Good job," in that low, even tone that somehow meant more than it should have. As the second week began, calving season kicked into full gear. The already demanding pace intensified. My schedule shifted to include night shifts in the calving barn, watching over pregnant cows, alert for signs of labor or trouble. It was during one of these nights, as a spring storm rattled the barn doors with wind and rain, that something shifted between us. We were on the midnight to dawn shift, moving quietly among the restless cows. Several were close to delivering. "That one's going soon," Ethan said, nodding toward a black Angus cow pawing at the straw. "See how she's looking at her flank? Contractions are starting." I nodded. I'd learned the signs. "Should we move her to the birthing stall?" "Good thinking." He smiled briefly, and the warmth in my chest was immediate. "Let's do it together. She looks a bit agitated." We moved her carefully, prepared the stall, and Ethan calmly walked me through what to expect. At first, everything progressed normally, but then, after about an hour, his brow furrowed. "She should be further along by now." He checked the cow, carefully and thoroughly. "The calf's not in the right position. We need to turn it. Soon." What followed was a crash course in the realities of ranch life. Ethan talked me through the process while he worked, arms deep inside the cow, gently but urgently trying to reposition the calf. I handed him tools, held the cow steady, followed instructions with every ounce of focus I had. When the calf finally emerged, wet, fragile, and new, I felt a wave of emotion that caught me off guard. Ethan moved quickly, clearing its airways, helping it stand. Despite his exhaustion, his touch was gentle. "Good job," he said, and it took me a moment to realize he was talking to me, not the calf. Most people from the city would have passed out. "I almost did," I admitted, "but I didn't want to let you down." He looked at me then, really looked at me. Something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or a question he didn't quite know how to ask. But he only nodded and turned back to the calf, making sure it was feeding. As dawn broke and the storm eased, we stood at the barn doors. The world outside was quiet, washed clean by the rain. "We delivered 3 tonight," Ethan said, leaning against the doorway. "Sun's coming up. Crew will be here soon." I stepped beside him, suddenly aware of how close we were. The warmth radiating from him in the cool morning air, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "My name is Henry. I've always been a city boy, born and raised in Chicago. Historic buildings, crowded streets, and the constant hum of urban life were the backdrop of my world. Concrete and glass shaped everything I knew. Nature, for me, was something trimmed into manicured parks or reserved for the occasional weekend trip to the coast. So when my journalism professor assigned our final project, an immersive feature requiring us to document a lifestyle completely different from our own, I found myself heading west, toward the Montana rangelands. A place so far removed from my experience, it might as well have been another planet. The assignment sounded simple. Spend 3 weeks embedded in an unfamiliar world, observe daily life, and write a feature piece capturing its essence through the eyes of an outsider. While my classmates chose urban beekeepers or lighthouse keepers in New England, I set my sights farther, much farther. The Blackwell Ranch. A sprawling cattle operation across thousands of acres of Montana prairie. After a few emails with the owner, Benjamin Blackwell, an older gentleman who seemed both skeptical and amused by a city boy's curiosity about ranch life, I was invited to stay. As I drove down the long dirt road to the ranch, dust trailing behind my rental car, doubt crept in. The landscape stretched out endlessly, open and unyielding. No skyscrapers, no traffic, no Wi-Fi bars, just sky and land. I felt like an astronaut stepping onto alien soil without a suit. The main house came into view, a sprawling, low structure clearly built over generations. Around it stood barns, storage sheds, and what looked like bunkhouses. As I parked, a man stepped out from one of the barns. He walked with the bow-legged gait of someone more at home on horseback than on solid ground. Tall, lean, his frame shaped by labor, not the gym. Dark hair curled beneath a sun-worn Stetson, and his jaw was shadowed by a few days' worth of stubble. His faded blue shirt clung to forearms marked by sun and work. His jeans were frayed at the edges, his boots caked in what I hoped was just mud. He looked about my age, maybe a few years older, but something about the way he carried himself suggested he'd lived twice as much. "You must be the writer," he called as I climbed out of the car, stretching after the long drive. "Henry Bennett," I said, extending my hand. "From Chicago University." His handshake was firm, his palm calloused. "Ethan Reeves. I'm the foreman here." He took in my clean jeans, button-down shirt, and shoes that had never met dirt. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Benjamin said you'd be here for calving season. Hope you brought clothes you don't mind ruining." I had, sort of. Online research had guided me to sturdy jeans, flannel shirts, and boots. They'd looked rugged in the store, but next to Ethan, they felt costume-like. "I think I'm prepared," I said, trying to sound confident, "though I've never been on a working ranch before." That earned a real smile. Brief, but it changed his whole face. "That's why you're here, to learn." He nodded toward the house. "Come on, Benjamin's waiting. Mia's probably got lunch ready. We'll get your things settled after." As I followed Ethan across the yard, I noticed how naturally he moved, like the land belonged to him, or maybe the other way around. I, on the other hand, felt like a tourist who had stumbled into someone else's movie set. Benjamin Blackwell greeted me warmly, a man in his 60s, his face weathered by sun and wind but full of presence. He asked about my drive and my studies. His wife Mia, kind, sturdy, and cheerful, served enough food to feed a crew twice our size. "You'll be staying in the bunkhouse with Ethan and a couple of the other hands," Benjamin said. "Figured that'd give you the most authentic angle for your article." I smiled and nodded, though my chest tightened. I'd expected a private space, somewhere to process, write, retreat. The idea of sharing quarters with seasoned ranch hands felt daunting. "It's basic but comfortable," Ethan added, sensing my hesitation. "And you'll have your own room, small but private enough to write." That helped. After lunch, Ethan showed me around the ranch, each building, each task. The scale was staggering. Thousands of cattle across a seemingly endless stretch of prairie. A core team of 8 full-time workers handled it all, with seasonal help during the busier times. "Calving season starts next week," Ethan said as we walked through a barn. "That's when it gets real. We'll be working round the clock, checking cows, helping with deliveries, making sure the calves are nursing." "You want me involved in all that?" I asked, the reality settling in. Ethan smiled, slow, steady. "If you're here to learn, you're going to learn it all," Benjamin added with a smirk. "Nothing gets more real than bringing new life into the world. But don't worry, no one expects you to be an expert. You'll learn like we all did." The bunkhouse, when we reached it, was plain but clean, a shared space with a kitchen, living area, 1 bathroom, and 6 individual bedrooms. Mine had just enough room for a bed, a small desk, and my suitcase. "It's not the Ritz," Ethan said. "It's perfect," I replied, honestly. He nodded. "Dinner's at 6. Work starts before dawn." Then he left me alone with my thoughts, and the quiet hum of the ranch beyond the walls. That night, I lay in bed, listening to the creak of wood, the lowing of distant cattle, the wind threading through barns and sheds. Everything smelled of hay, leather, and open space. It was all so unfamiliar. I'd come here for a story. But now, I wasn't sure if I was ready for the one unfolding. The intimacy between us had grown quietly, almost imperceptibly, until it was impossible to ignore. "Sun's coming up," Ethan said, leaning against the barn door. The golden light spilled across the pasture as I joined him, suddenly aware of how close we were standing, how the warmth from his body cut through the crisp morning air. He looked down at me, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "You're not what I expected, Henry from Chicago." "What did you expect?" I asked, my pulse quickening. He shrugged, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Someone softer, someone who'd complain more and help less, someone counting the days until they could get back to civilization." "Maybe that was me when I first arrived," I admitted. "But something's changed." His gaze held mine, steady and searching. "Yeah," he said at last. "Something has." Before anything more could be said, the morning crew arrived. We stepped apart, but something between us had shifted, something unspoken, yet understood. And as I moved to brief the others on the night's events, I realized this was no longer just a story. It had become something much more. The storm had settled into a quiet snowfall, blanketing the land in white. As Benjamin made the evening assignments, he looked to Ethan. "You take night duty in the calving barn, and take Henry with you. 2 sets of eyes are better than 1 in this weather." Ethan nodded, his face unreadable. Though I sensed the tightness in his shoulders, I felt it too, anticipation laced with nerves, a night alone, far from the others. We gathered supplies, lanterns, blankets, thermoses of coffee, and trudged through the snow to the calving barn. Inside, the air was warm and thick with the scent of hay and livestock. The cows rested peacefully in their stalls, bellies full with new life. We set up a makeshift station in the corner, arranging hay bales into seating. Ethan moved from stall to stall, his hands steady, his motions practiced. Eventually, he sat beside me. "Should be a quiet night," he murmured. "Storm seems to have calmed them." I nodded, hyper-aware of how close we were. The world outside was locked in ice and silence, but inside the air felt charged. Ethan turned to me, his voice lower now. "I think it's worth trying," he said. "You're worth trying for." His words bypassed every defense I had, going straight to something deeper. I reached for him. In that moment, words became unnecessary. What followed was an expression beyond language, honest and real, and long overdue. Later, as we rode back under a slanting afternoon sun, clarity settled in. No matter what obstacles lay ahead, no matter how uncertain the road, we had something worth holding on to. The days that followed passed too quickly, each one tinged with a bittersweet awareness that time was running out. We worked hard, tending to the nonstop demands of calving season. But the nights? Those belonged to us. We kept things discreet around the others, but found quiet corners for conversation and solace in midnight walks beneath the vast Montana sky. On my final night, after a farewell dinner where Benjamin and Mia thanked me for my help, Ethan turned to me. "Let's take a bottle of whiskey out to the old hay barn," he said. "There's something I want to show you." The old barn stood at the far edge of the property, mostly replaced by a newer structure, but it still served for overflow storage and offered more privacy. He led me inside and up a ladder to the hayloft. A small window overlooked the entire ranch. He had prepared the space. Old horse blankets softened the wooden floor, and a battery lantern cast a warm glow. We settled in, shoulder to shoulder, as he poured us each a drink. "To your article," he said, raising his tin cup. "May it capture this place the way it deserves." I clinked mine against his. "And to the man who showed me its heart." For a while we sat in silence, the kind that says more than words ever could. I committed it all to memory, the scent of hay, the feel of worn wood, the way Ethan's presence grounded me. Then he set down his cup and stood, lifting the lantern. "I brought you here for a reason." He led me to a central wooden beam, its surface worn smooth with age. "Found this last year while stacking hay. Thought you'd want to see it." I followed his gaze. 2 sets of initials, J, M, and TR, were carved into the wood, encased in a rough heart. Beneath it, a date, June 17th, 1943. Looks like something you'd see carved into a tree, Ethan said softly. Two people marking something that mattered. But the date, during World War II. I traced my fingers over the carving, the weight of history settling into my chest. Who do you think they were? I asked around, Ethan replied. Benjamin didn't know, but Walter Green, his family's been here forever, remembered a rancher named Jacob Miller. Owned this place back then, had a ranch hand named Thomas Rogers. Understanding flickered. You think they were together? Ethan met my gaze. Yeah, neither of them ever married. They ran the ranch until Miller passed in the 70s. Rogers died a few months later. Town lore says they were just old bachelors who never found the right women. But we both knew better. They carved this during a war, I whispered, when everything was uncertain, when the future wasn't promised. But they carved it anyway, Ethan said. Two men, a hidden love, a quiet, defiant truth etched into the bones of this place. I wanted you to see this, he continued, before you left. So you'd know this. Us, it's not impossible. It's not even new. People have always found a way. His words weren't promises. They were something better. Perspective. Hope. I turned to him, my voice lost. Instead, I kissed him, slow, certain, and full of everything I couldn't yet say. In that loft, we created something of our own, a private world stitched into the history of the ranch. Later, lying beneath the window, I whispered into the quiet, I'll come back. After the article's published, after graduation, I'll come back. His fingers traced lazy circles along my back. I'll be here, he murmured. Land doesn't move. People like me, we stay rooted. And people like me? I asked, lifting my head. He smiled. People like you bring new eyes. You go out, see the world, and then you come back, share what you found. I held on to his words. Maybe our differences weren't walls, but bridges. What if I found a way to be based closer? I asked, the idea forming aloud. There are newspapers in Montana, magazines. I could freelance, travel when I need to, but still, come home. That word lingered, home. Ethan's eyes lit with hope. You'd consider that? Not immediately, I said. I need to graduate, build a foundation, but yes, for this, for you. He pulled me close, sealing the moment with a kiss. In the meantime, we've got phones, email, holidays. We'll figure it out. What once felt impossible now felt tangible, something worth fighting for. We stayed in that loft until the moon had crossed the sky. Talking, not talking, planning, simply being. By the time we returned to the bunkhouse, dawn was beginning to break. In the morning, I packed my things, said my goodbyes. Ethan kept a respectful distance, just as we'd agreed, but when the time came, he walked me to my car. I'll call when I get back to Chicago, I promised. He nodded. Drive safe. Weather looks clear, but the mountain passes can surprise you. I extended my hand, the only proper goodbye under watchful eyes. Ethan took it, his grip steady, familiar. For a moment, his thumb brushed over my wrist, a quiet, private gesture in plain sight. See you soon, Henry from Chicago. I smiled. See you soon, Ethan Reeves. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. He stood where I'd left him, a lone figure framed by endless prairie. He raised a hand. I raised mine in return, just before the road curved, and he disappeared from view. I came to Montana chasing a story, but what I found was something much greater. A truth carved into an old barn beam, a certainty written across the open sky. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning.